Hello, I'm Dr. Scott Watier.
And I'm Tommy Welling, and you're listening to the Fasting for Life podcast.
This podcast is about using fasting as a tool to regain your health, achieve ultimate wellness, and live the life you truly deserve.
Each episode is a short conversation on a single topic with immediate actionable steps. We cover everything from fat loss and health and wellness to the science of lifestyle design.
We started Fasting for Life because of how fasting has transformed our lives, and we hope to share the tools that we have learned along the way. Hey everyone, welcome to the Fasting for Life podcast. My name is Dr. Scott Watier, and I'm here, as always, with my good friend and colleague, Tommy Welling. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Hey, Scott, how are you?
Doing fantastic, my friend. Excited for today's conversation. We're going to drop the title here, The 8 Hormones Blocking Fat Loss and How Fasting Flips Them. Ooh. So we're going to go through Act 1, metabolic gatekeepers, insulin and glucagon. Act 2, like a Romeo and Juliet play, appetite and stress loop, cortisol, leptin, and ghrelin. And then we're going to talk about Act 3, which is the sex hormones, testosterone, estrogen, and your repair hormone, growth hormone. Of course, with the Fasting for Life twist. Hopefully, you'll be able to take 1 or 2 action steps or action items on things to focus on today and this week to adopt your fasting lifestyle. So before we get into that, if you're new to the podcast, welcome in. You want to know more about why we do what we do week in and week out, our story and our transformation and how fasting has completely transformed our lives, head back to episode 0, episode 1, give it a listen. If you are a long-term listener, shout out. Thank you so much for being on this journey with us. We had no idea that we would reach over 5 million people. And just tens of thousands of messages, thousands of challenges, near 7,000 people have gone through our challenges, hundreds and hundreds of coaching folks. Just so excited and so grateful to be doing this with you, Tommy. Let's give a shout out to someone that took the time to leave us a comment on Spotify.
Yeah, absolutely. Mastaflex a couple of weeks ago said, been tracking you guys for a few years now, and I'm sure you already talked about it, but I was curious, what's a good approach for losing weight, getting metabolically healthier while using fasting as a tool while strength training and doing runs anywhere between 8 to 12 miles a week? So Mastaflex, way to be, working your fitness goals into your fasting lifestyle as well. So I absolutely love this question. If you search on Fasting for Life, search for running, you'll see a few different episodes where we went through some of these. And so I would start with what you really need to say, okay, compartmentalize your fat loss goals first so that it doesn't feel like they're bumping into each other. Okay. So I like to have your main goal, which if it's for fat loss, then let's quantify exactly how much fat loss is that, because could you be fasting at a point where your running goals are a little bit, kind of in the backseat or like a secondary goal? Yes, absolutely. I don't think you're going to be 100% losing fat as fast as possible and 100% like getting your performance up on your runs as quickly as possible at the exact same time. So sometimes when everything feels like a priority, then kind of nothing's a priority. So I like to think about the fat loss as the number one goal, and then you can put more of the emphasis on there. So whenever you're not sure which one should win, you should have a priority already set out for yourself so that you can make some of those concessions in the moment, plan it out from week to week. And absolutely what I would do is let's say if you're doing a lot of OMADs, let's start with the timing of that OMAD. What's your favorite OMAD around your favorite time to get your run in? So for a lot of folks, that might be having your meal about 3 to 4 hours before your big run so that you have time to digest it, time to kind of work through some of that fuel, but then you also don't have any shortage of fuel when you get into some of those longer runs. So depends on exactly how you're kind of spacing out your runs throughout the week, and then also your meal timing as well. But start off with some of those other episodes where we address that on some of the Q&As specifically, and then a couple of our exercise episodes as well. And then let us know if you need a little bit more specific guidance. Happy to help.
Yep. So episode 304 is a good one. Episode 263, episode 296, and then a couple of our most recent Q&A. So if you just search Fasting for Life Q&A, they'll all pop up, and you'll see in the description where we go over these things because we've gotten these questions submitted before.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's get into the 8 hormones blocking fat loss and how fasting flips them. So
Heck
if you
yeah.
ever felt like you're doing all the right things and the scale won't move, it's not just about the calories, it's about hormones as well. Today we'll walk through the 8 hormones that decide whether you stay where you are or you finally lose that 20 to 30 pounds, and how smart fasting changes the game. So we're going to get into Act 1 first, which is the metabolic gatekeepers, then Act 2, which is appetite and stress, and then Act 3 is the sex hormones and repair hormones. So we're just going to go through what it does, why it matters, and how fasting and lifestyle changes modulate it.
Okay.
There's going to be some repetition here in some of the levers that we pull, because the first one we're going to start with which the first one we are going to start with, which is insulin, is connected to all of these other hormones. Insulin is one of those master hormones in your body. So metabolic gatekeepers, insulin, it's the on-off switch. Insulin is the storage signal. It moves glucose into the cells, drives glycogen synthesis, and promotes fat storage when chronically elevated. So, 3 meals a day plus snacks, grazing. In a fed state, insulin dominates. In a fasted state, insulin falls. That's going to open the door for fat mobilization and ketone production. So we know the data is clear that fasting insulin and insulin resistance and metabolic risk go up when you are counting calories, tracking macros, and have some of this insulin resistance lurking beneath the surface. Because what we know is that diabetes doesn't show up overnight. Cardiovascular disease doesn't show up overnight. Insulin is related to 8 out of the top 10 disease processes for all-cause mortality here in the U.S. So what's the biggest lever we can pull? Well, we're going to start with fasting forward. And the difference between grazing and TRE, or time-compressed eating, or intermittent fasting, whatever you want to call it, but shrinking that window of when you're bringing in food to bring down that total insulin load. Because you can have normal A1C and normal blood sugar, yet your fasting insulin and your insulin hormone can be already underperforming, which will lead to increased liver enzymes, increased blood pressure, visceral weight, waist circumference increase, tired, fatigue, brain fog, all these different things, which is the starting point for ending up on the diabetes roller coaster, 10, 20 years down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. And so as we can understand what's happening way before we get to that, even that detectable point, then what we can do is we can be steering in the right direction for hormonal balance, even though a lot of these won't normally be measured during normal routine blood work. And so that's part of the iceberg analogy, being able to see what's under the surface, what's going on, what's kind of building and growing under the surface well before it becomes outwardly obvious, right?
Yep. So fasting forward, foundational fasting, 16 to 18 hours a day, timing those nutrition opportunities, putting a little intentionality into those food choices, right? If we can tap into insulin, then the trickle down to everything else we're going to go over today is going to work more efficiently and more effectively to lose the weight and keep it off once and for all. The second hormone, this is kind of like a little 1B, like a secret hormone that not a lot of people talk about. It's glucagon.
Oh, yeah.
Glucagon is insulin's brake pedal to insulin's gas, or vice versa, whichever way you want to look at it.
The flip side of the coin in the pancreas.
Yeah, it's the counterbalance. It's that old, what was that Law and Order show that my dad used to watch, where you have that old balance scale that you see on a lot of lawyers. What are those scales called?
Oh, yeah.
Balance scale? I think it's just a balance scale.
I think so, yeah.
Bring me back to chemistry class where we had those different blocks and circles, like one was brass, one was copper, and then you had to weigh out things. And okay, I'm going to stop talking. That makes no sense. But glucagon is insulin's counterbalance. So during fasting, now this is going to sound counterintuitive at first, it raises blood glucose by stimulating liver glycogen breakdown. So glycogen is the short-term energy supply. We have a silent epidemic right now of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Before your ALT and AST go up, your liver is clogged. If your short-term energy supply light switch that's controlled by insulin and glucagon isn't working effectively, it's going to be hard to flip the switch to tap into those long-term fat stores.
Exactly.
So initially it raises blood glucose, so it's clearing out the liver and getting rid of that short-term energy supply. So when you start fasting consistently, you can then more easily, with glucagon's help, promote ketone and lipid use for energy. So you can tap into those long-term stores.
Yeah.
So insulin rules the day, glucagon rules the night.
That's a good way to think about it.
Day man, night man, if you guys get that reference, right?
Yeah.
So as glucose falls, insulin drops. Glucagon rises in the short term, keeps the brain fueled while you're transitioning into more fat oxidation and ketone production. It's going to stabilize your energy the more consistent you get the more consistent you get with your fasting efforts. You're swapping fuel tanks, so to speak, as you go from fasting to fueling and fasting to fueling. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And just think about it this way. If you've been relatively stable on the scale, or if the scale's been going up even slowly over time, then typically where we've found ourselves is in an energy surplus, in an energy storage state, which means a little bit too much or a lot too much insulin, which means also not enough glucagon or not enough switching into needing the glucagon because we're overfueled essentially. And what we're doing when we're building these long-term fat stores, when the scale's moving up, what we're doing is we're storing pre-eaten calories at that point. And so in that overfed state, the balance, the balance scale, if you will, is tipped in one direction, heavier on the insulin side. And so then as we start to more consistently fast, as we put this metabolic demand on our body to tap into those long-term fat stores, we can really feel that transition sometimes, especially at the beginning. It can feel tough to get into a fat burning state. That's where we get some of those symptoms of keto flu and things like that, where we're just not feeling 100%. And it tends to happen. We tend to feel that as we get into a longer fast and already burn through those stored glycogen stores, or after we break our fast, and then our body has to go back into carbohydrate burning after you've been in fat burning, and feeling that that switch back and forth like that. That's one of the things that does get easier over time. But the reason why it can be so difficult, especially at the beginning, or especially when you have more weight to lose or you have more insulin resistance, is because you haven't put that demand on your body, or you haven't put it on that demand very consistently or very often. So it's basically a biochemical muscle for your body to get better at, and it does get better at it. It just takes consistency over time. So that's the encouragement for that too.
And this is why, so for these first two, the metabolic gatekeepers, the biggest leverage you can pull is consistent foundational fasting, earlier meal timing, carbs earlier in the day, because late night eating blocks nighttime insulin is less sensitive. It's less effective. So late eating suppresses the glucagon. So the repair overnight, because glucagon runs the night, becomes inefficient. And that glucagon preserves that metabolic flexibility. So it allows you to switch fuel tanks from glucose to ketones to tap into those long-term fat stores and oxidize that fat. So fasting during the day trains the system. Glucagon at night reinforces that system, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does, yeah.
Yep. Okay. Let's go to Act 2, appetite and stress. So we're going to talk about appetite hormones and stress hormones. Cortisol, stress and belly fat. What it does, cortisol is a stress hormone that raises blood glucose, and when chronically elevated, drives central fat storage, visceral fat, the waist to height ratio, the waist circumference, the insulin assessment we have that shows you how to measure this on the website, thefastingforlife.com. It's a little 2-page PDF. It shows you how to measure that visceral adiposity, that central weight gain, lower abdomen, hips and thighs for women, central abdomen for men. That is going to be a metabolically active tissue. I saw an article on Weight Watchers talking about this the other day. Okay. I'm like, what? Oh my God, the landscape's changing. But cortisol is going to drive central fat storage and can worsen that insulin resistance, which was Act 1, right? The top tier, insulin and glucagon. So well-programmed, consistent fasting is going to lower that inflammation, that inflammatory response from that visceral fat, and the glycemic load, your blood sugar load on a day-to-day basis. It's going to reduce that chronic cortisol stimulation, which is when you start to fast, especially for women, you need to watch how is your sleep? How's your stress level? How are you feeling? Women's HPA axis, the stress response system, is a lot more sensitive than men's. So you need to really be like, how to anchor this and how to fix this is metabolic hygiene. It's consistent sleep, morning light, walking, resistant training, cutting off caffeine earlier in the day. Fasting is one lever that works incredibly powerfully, but the sleep and stress foundation also needs to be in place. So you're not wired and tired and waking up drained, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. The cortisol response the way that cortisol responds with chronic poor sleep hygiene, chronically being underslept and poorly recovered is one of the reasons why my caloric, my low and slow, my tracking everything, tracking macros and calories, why it wasn't nearly as effective as it should have been, because cortisol was all out of whack, because my sleep was out of whack. And so I didn't want to kind of see that was a big part of the problem, because I wore not needing a whole lot of sleep as kind of a badge of honor. And that was one of the tricky things, really kind of throwing a wrench into my results. So even with really good food choices, even with really consistent fasting, you still can be absolutely, cutting yourself off, cutting your feet out from under you just by not paying attention to that one major lever, because the third of our time that goes towards the recovery and the reset of all of our cells includes all of the critical biochemistry for the fat loss process and metabolic efficiency, right?
100%. This was part of my story as well, which is why it's one of our foundational pieces of our curriculum is like, we got to manage the sleep and the stress as well, because cortisol and long-term cortisol elevation will double down on making that insulin effectiveness, the Act 1, metabolic gatekeepers work much, much less efficiently. One thing about cortisol I will note is the symptoms of, so I do a lot of consulting and work in the functional medicine space. Mm-hmm. And one thing we see is we test for cortisol, because the symptoms of high cortisol and low cortisol, so like alarm stage, adrenals are pumping out cortisol, high stress, that only lasts for so long before the adrenal reserves actually slow down and the production slows down. So the symptoms of high cortisol and low cortisol are almost the same. So in this case, I always recommend test, don't guess. And there are cortisol tests that you can get. Go on, Dr. Google, do a Google search. They're affordable, but really test your cortisol to figure out where you're at before you just start making these changes. But from a day-to-day process, do you wake up feeling rested most days? Do you feel wired and tired? Do you have lots of cravings, which is why Act 2 is cortisol and appetite hormones. We're going to get to those two in just a second, leptin and ghrelin, because they're related. How's your energy level during your workouts? How's your, when life's and some curveball comes in, how do you respond to that? Does that drive you to wanting to break your fast, or more craving behavior, or more imbalanced relationship with food behavior? So those are some things on a day-to-day basis that you can kind of keep an eye on without having that testing. But if this is a concern for you, I definitely recommend test, don't guess. All right, let's get into the next two in this category. Act 2, appetite and stress. Leptin. This is your I'm full signal. Leptin tells the hypothalamus, the HPA axis, the top of the HPA axis, your stress response axis, how much energy is stored, and signals satiety. Here's the catch. Excess body fat can drive leptin resistance, so the brain stops hearing the full signal. As long as you're not driving. Give me a hallelujah and amen, raise your hand. Right? You don't feel the full signal until it's too late. And then you get that, feeling, right?
Yeah. Yeah, like it was a delayed response. Like I wish I would have had this signal a little while ago.
So here's from a fasting angle. Chronic snacking, grazing, ultra-refined processed foods, the quick hit of sugar in those frappuccinos from Starbucks,
Hmm.
Those are going to keep insulin higher and disrupt the leptin signaling. Giving the brain clear fed versus fasted states are going to help restore that sensitivity. So as fat mass comes down through structured fasting and intentional nutrition opportunities, leptin resistance improves and appetite becomes more predictable. When you're dialed in, it should feel like, wow, I'm not really starving or cravey, and I feel good on my energy reserves.
Yeah.
This is one of the catches with the hedonic food scale, where diet foods, you know, eating like a bird throughout the day, skipping breakfast. We've changed our tune on this over the years. We want to be eating our larger meals and intake earlier in the day when insulin is more sensitive.
Hmm.
This is why the research is clear. That leads to more binge behavior later in the day, more intake later in the day. So a balanced, structured fasting window and nutrition opportunity is one of the biggest levers you can pull, and early day eating is going to help reset these hunger hormones. We did an episode directly on this, Tommy. I just thought of this in real time while we were prepping. It didn't come to me.
Hmm.
But we did an episode on leptin and how there's like a 7 to 14 to 21 day lag if you go off the rails
Yeah.
and have a big eating, kind of overindulgence episode.
Sure.
Then you've got a leptin lag on your hunger cues taking 7 to 14 days. It lasted all the way to 21 days, if I'm remembering correctly, but it wasn't clinically statistically significant at that point.
Yeah.
But the residual effect, that lag effect, was still there.
Yeah, and the best reset for it was a nice 36-hour fast.
Yep.
Was a really good way to just kind of reset the dopamine reward centers. And when it comes to the hormone balance, we really, the reason why we're talking about this is because hormones really drive a lot of our subconscious behavior, because they're the physiological captains of the ship. And when we are taking control of the hormone response, it means that we are taking control of our food choices. We are prioritizing protein, which is, as far as the macronutrients go, that is our main hormonal lever. Because
protein is like a little superhero.
It absolutely is. And it doesn't happen by accident. So it takes a little bit of forethought. It's more expensive. You have to prepare it. It's going to be the one that makes you feel fuller faster, which is actually a good thing. We can use that to our advantage. But at the same time, it tends to get under prioritized, especially if we're out to eat, because it's so expensive. So carbohydrates and fats tend to be much cheaper, and they tend to overwhelm our plate.
Just look at your favorite restaurant. Look at the 14-ounce sirloin or filet price versus the pasta primavera.
Yep. With a little chicken.
A little 4 strips of chicken, right? Yeah. Like it's just a reality of the food world that we live in.
Mm-hmm. It's a good point. And so it doesn't happen by accident, but when we're prioritizing protein at our nutrition opportunities, that really is the biggest lever that we have to reset those hormones. Many of them, not just the hunger hormones too.
Yep. Protein is a superpower. That's why prioritize protein, double your protein every plate, simplest way to start. Don't worry about weighing it or tracking it. Just double the protein. Find more ways to get protein in.
Yeah, satiety goes through the roof like that. Yep.
Right. Satiety will go through the roof, help resetting that leptin resistance. Ghrelin, Act 2, the hunger hormones, right? So leptin's the I'm full. So this is the Act 2, appetite and stress. Cortisol, we talked about leptin, which is the I'm full signal. Ghrelin is the hunger hormone. It's the one, ghrelin, it growls. When you start fasting, it's a mechanical release of this hunger hormone. So when your stomach empties and there's nothing in the tank, your ghrelin is naturally going to go up to be like, hey, I'm hungry. But then you're looking in the mirror going, I got plenty of stored energy. What the hell's going on? Anyone ever been hangry before?
Right.
So ghrelin rises before meals to trigger hunger and falls after eating. Sleep loss, alcohol, and erratic on-off eating behaviors will elevate ghrelin and drive cravings. It's rhythmic and adapts to your meal timing. So if you're starting fasting and you're like, oh my God, I'm hungry all the time, it's going to get better. Because when you commit to a consistent foundational fasting window, day after day, week after week, your hunger is going to shift. Just think about dogs have this internally. They know. If my wife's alarm, she doesn't get out of bed at 6 a.m., those dogs are pitter-pattering around our bedroom waiting for her to get up because they know they get fed between 6 and 6:30. They have this internal wake-up alarm system based on their hunger cues. Like, they know. When I take them out before bed every night, I take them out into the yard. It's gotten to the point where they don't even go do what they need to do unless I walk out there with them, because they're just sitting by me waiting for me to go back in because they know they get their nightly multivitamin.
Right.
It's their treat. Like, you little SOBs, like, you got this figured out. So ghrelin is rhythmic and it adapts to your meal timing. So when you commit to that fasting window, your hunger spikes are going to be more consistent and they're going to show up on schedule, and you're going to be like, oh yeah, this happens every time, 18 hours into a 22-hour fast. Then it gives you more power to be like, nope, I'm going to ignore you, because hunger comes in waves, usually about 10 to 15 minutes. So stable wake time, consistent fasting and eating window, and sleep are going to be the biggest levers that you can pull for resetting this hunger hormone. All right, Act 3. Sex hormones and your repair hormone. So we're going to talk about testosterone, estrogen, and growth hormone. What is testosterone? It supports muscle mass, strength, mood, libido, and it has a major role in how your body handles glucose and your abdominal fat distribution. This was me. I thought it was my testosterone. I hired a very well-known functional nutritionist here in Houston. Cost me lots of money years ago when I couldn't figure out why I was tired and looked like a strong man in the off season, and I was doing all the right things, and I just couldn't get the scale to stay down and consistently move, even when I was on point for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Because chronically high insulin, which I had, unbeknownst to me, I didn't know. I thought it was my gut. I thought it was my testosterone. I thought it was my adrenals. It was my fasting insulin was 22 when it should be less than 5. Poor sleep, I wore that as a badge of honor for years, and that excess visceral fat are going to suppress high insulin, poor sleep, and the excess weight are going to suppress testosterone. When fasting drives fat loss, sleep improves. When you do resistance training, you create a positive upward spiral for testosterone. This applies to women as well. So, Tommy, you shared in prep for this conversation, for you to get your T to come up, you needed to get the damn weight off, right?
I had to. And that was the only thing that brought the testosterone up, because, going through my 20s, my early and then into mid 20s, it was like I already saw a huge dip in my testosterone. So I don't know what it was in my teenage years, but I knew that I was having these symptoms of low testosterone.
Yep.
And then as I got it checked, and then it was in the 200s, and then eventually it was in the high 100s. And it was like, well, of course, like no kidding. Like it's obvious why this is one of the reasons why I'm not feeling well. But 50 pounds off, 45 pounds off later, and then rechecking it, and then it's finally in the 700s. Closer, or in the range where it needed to be, like in my late 30s. There was such a night and day difference, but it can feel like you're kind of chasing your tail around with those. So, on the front end, the lesson to my former self was just get the dang weight off, because the weight was putting like all these overfilled fat cells were putting so much of a stress on the rest of my hormonal physiology.
See, I hadn't gotten to that point yet. My testosterone was still in the normal range, but my insulin was way out of whack.
Yeah.
So there's that. So in terms of like visualizing this testosterone picture, is put sleep, lifting, and your nutrition opportunities in a triangle. All three sides of those support natural testosterone production. So healthy protein sources, red meat, eggs, micronutrients. So using natural salts that have all the micronutrients and minerals in them. Those are going to be things that really help balance the testosterone levels, but getting the weight off is one of the biggest levers that you can pull. So we're still in Act 3, sex hormones and repair. Estrogen. Estrogen is going to dictate fat storage patterns and weight balance. So estrogen influences where fat is stored, how it's mobilized, and shifts during different life stages. So imbalance in estrogen or excess estrogen relative to the other androgens, your other sex hormones, will increase fat deposition in hips, thighs, and chests. So we're talking transition from childbearing years to pre, peri, and post menopause. And for men, we're talking about the beer belly and the man boobs. Let's just be honest. So again, here it is. Here's the kicker. Adipose tissue itself, the fat, produces estrogen. It mutes testosterone. As body fat decreases via our sustainable fasting lifestyle and increasing the movement, the resistance training, and the low intense steady state walking, etc., that zone 1 stuff, estrogen load will decrease. So circadian aligned eating, so earlier eating opportunities, proper sleep, lowering alcohol, and supporting your liver are going to help clear that estrogen and ultimately balance that testosterone. Now, again, for some women that have imbalanced cycles or in that transition period, you may need some lab testing to know where you're at, to know exactly what lever to pull. But the consistent fasting with proper protein-paced nutrition and fueling nutrition opportunities and reducing that high refined, processed, ultra-processed foods is going to be good for the majority. You're going to feel, the scale's going to start moving. The fat deposition on where it is on your body, you're going to notice the scale might not be moving, but you notice the waist, the pant size went down. That's a good thing.
Great thing.
The last one is growth hormone, right? So we're in Act 3, sex hormones and repair. This is your repair hormone. This goes along with glucagon. It's the night shift repair crew. So it's going to support muscle building, fat mobilization, and tissue repair. And it's secreted in pulses. Here's the catch. Particularly during deep sleep. How many times have we said good sleep matters in this episode? Mm-hmm. And in response to exercise. There's a third category. Growth hormone naturally increases during fasting, which is going to help preserve your lean mass while promoting fat utilization and ketones.
Yep.
So we hear this often. Oh, my doctor said, my trainer said, my whoever said. This is why 16, 18 hour, all the way up to about 48 hour fast, you're going to see the biggest growth hormone spike to protect the lean mass that you have. And allow you to balance the hunger hormones, get better sleep, and allow insulin to come down, which is at the top of this list, the trickle-down effect like we talked about earlier. Mm-hmm. So we're going to compress the feeding. Don't do the before bed, late night eating. Get the nutrition in earlier in the day. And don't miss that first deep sleep opportunity. For me, if I go to bed too late, I miss it and my sleep sucks. Right. And I know the scale is either going to be the same or tick up a little bit the next day.
Even if the sleep duration is the same, that quality goes down if you miss that window.
100%.
Yeah.
So insulin runs your day, growth hormone runs your night. Fasting gives growth hormone a quiet workplace to do what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, you know what you can also do to maximize your musculoskeletal system and preserve that lean muscle mass? Two things: prioritize protein at every nutrition opportunity, and stimulate your musculoskeletal system. Boom. Do some consistent resistance training. And when you're doing those things, then you don't have to worry about your metabolic powerhouse, your muscles. Your muscles and your bones are getting good stimulation and they're getting good hormonal signals so that the fasting time in between those meals is not going to negate that. It's going to be supportive of that, and you can work on body composition even when you have fat loss goals. It's great.
100%. So as we wrap up today's episode, remember, if you want your hormones to work for you instead of against you, don't chase the perfection. Pick one fasting habit, stack it with better sleep, and let time and consistency do the heavy lifting. So Tommy, appreciate the conversation as always. Until next time, keep fasting for life, not just the dang scale.
Wow.
Appreciate it, man.
Well said. Absolutely.
We'll talk soon.
Thank you. Bye.
See ya.
So, you've heard today's episode, and you may be wondering, where do I start? Head on over to thefastingforlife.com and sign up for our newsletter, where you'll receive fasting tips and strategies to maximize results and fit fasting into your day-to-day life.
While you're there, download your free Fast Start guide to get started today. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Fasting for Life.